Loneliness traces furrows in her gaze. The salty breeze glides over Sarah's fair skin, mixing the humid morning perfume with the contained tremor of her heart, while the silence of the yacht only echoes her breathing. Suddenly, a dry crack. The metal ladder, creaking under unexpected steps, makes her body shudder and reveals, in almost sacred silence, the figure of a man with blue eyes as deep as the sea that surrounds them. The gentle touch of a sunbeam on her hair contrasts with the weight of the secrets they both carry, and between the whisper of distant waves and a low voice that will never be heard, a longing is born that already senses the impossible dilemma that awaits them. The sun rose timidly over the crystal-clear waters of Miami Beach, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange that reflected in the calm waves of the Atlantic Ocean. It was a morning like many others for Sarah Johnson, except for the fact that today she would embark on a journey that would change her. Life forever. At 20, Sarah carried on her shoulders the weight of responsibilities that weren't hers by right, but by necessity. Her softly blue eyes, inheritance from a Spanish grandmother she never knew, contrasted with her fair skin kissed by the Florida sun. Her wavy brown hair fell over her delicate shoulders, framing a face where youth fought against the early marks of worry. "Honey, are you sure you want to do this?" Her Aunt Rose's voice cut through her thoughts as she packed the small, worn suitcase. "Working on a boat, with people you don't know," Sarah sighed, carefully folding the last white uniform they had given her. "I don't have a choice, Aunt Rose. David and Emma need to stay in school. What I make at the diner barely covers rent." The truth was that life had been cruel to the Johnson siblings. 3 years ago, their father had left promising a better life in California. They never heard from him again. 6 months later, their mother succumbed to an illness that could have been treated if they'd had money for medicine. Since then, Sarah had become mother, father, and provider for David, 15, and Emma, 12. The marina was busy that morning. Luxurious yachts swayed gently in the waters like sleeping giants waiting for their owners. Sarah clutched the crumpled paper in her hands. Dock 7, Yacht Hope. The name seemed like a cruel irony for someone who had lost theirs so long ago. "You must be the new employee." The gruff voice made her jump. A stocky man, about 50, watched her with evaluating eyes. "I'm Carlos, the captain. You're right on time." Sarah followed him across the gangplank, her steps hesitant on the polished wood. The Hope was impressive, 50 meters of pure luxury floating on the waters. Polished mahogany walls, gold details, windows that looked like framed pictures of the infinite sea. "Your duties are simple," Carlos explained as he guided her through the corridors. "Cleaning, organizing, preparing meals when necessary. The boss, well, he likes privacy. You probably won't even see him during the trip. How long will we be at sea?" 3 weeks, maybe a month. Depends on his mood." Carlos stopped in front of a door. "These are your quarters. Small, but comfortable. The uniform must always be impeccable. Mr. Montenegro is demanding." Montenegro. The name echoed in her mind as she organized her few things in the tiny room. There was something melancholic in the air, as if the yacht itself carried invisible sadness in its luxurious walls. The first hours passed in a blur of instructions and tasks. Sarah quickly learned where everything was, memorized meal times, the specific cleaning products for each surface. It was a completely different world from hers. where she counted every penny spent. Here, waste seemed to be the norm. It was at sunset that she saw him for the first time. Matthew Montenegro was standing with his back turned, watching the sun set on the horizon. Tall, broad. Shoulders, black hair slightly wavy from the sea breeze. He wore a simple white shirt and linen pants, but there was something in the way he carried himself that screamed power and loneliness in equal measure. Sarah hesitated at the deck door, the dinner tray balanced in her hands. Should she announce her presence? Simply leave the food and go? "You can come in." His voice surprised her, deep, controlled, but with a touch of tiredness that didn't match his imposing appearance. She approached. Cautiously depositing the tray on the teak table. When their eyes met for the first time, Sarah held her breath. Matthew was 33, but his deep blue eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived several lives. They were eyes that had seen too much, loved too much, lost too much. "You're new." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Sarah Johnson." He studied her for a moment that seemed eternal. "Do you have family?" The question caught her off guard. "Two younger siblings. Parents?" "Deceased." The word came out dry, emotionless. It was easier that way. Something passed through his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Compassion. "The food is getting cold." It was a clear dismissal, but not harsh. Sarah made a small bow and withdrew, her heart still racing from the brief encounter. "And you, dear viewer, have you ever felt that instant connection with someone, even knowing you belong to different worlds? Leave in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever experienced something similar. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this exciting story. The days on the Hope followed a predictable routine. Matthew spent most of his time in his private office or on the upper deck, always alone, always watching the horizon, as if searching for something the sea had taken. Sarah fulfilled her duties with silent efficiency, but couldn't help noticing the small details that told the untold story of that man. There were photographs carefully kept in drawers that she found while cleaning. A beautiful woman with blonde hair and a radiant smile. Women's clothes still hanging in one of the closets, as if waiting for an owner who would never return. A wedding ring he sometimes twisted on his finger while contemplating the sea. 3 years, Carlos told her one night, while they shared coffee in the crew's small kitchen. It's been 3 years since she died. Car accident. Since then, he lives on this boat. Running, you know. From what? From memories, from life, from himself. Sarah understood about running. She herself had run so many times, from poverty, from pain, from the constant feeling of not being enough. But there were always David and Emma to bring her back to reality. It was on a particularly hot afternoon that everything began to change. Sarah was reorganizing the main kitchen, frustrated with the waste of space in the name of aesthetics. Enormous cabinets stored few items, while really useful things were hidden in impossible places. "This doesn't make any sense," she murmured to herself, balanced on a stool while trying to reach a pot at the back of a high cabinet. "What doesn't make sense?" Matthew's voice startled her so much that she almost fell. He caught her by the arm, stabilizing her, and for a moment they were too close. Sarah could smell his expensive cologne mixed with sea salt. "Sorry, sir, I was just reorganizing my kitchen." There was a touch of amusement in his voice. "It's just—" Sarah stepped down from the stool, moving away from him. "It's all very beautiful, but nothing practical. Whoever designed this clearly never cooked in their life. My wife chose everything." The words came out before he could contain them. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah bit her lip, regretting her frankness. "She liked beautiful things," Matthew continued, surprising them both. "She said life was already hard enough to surround ourselves with. Ugly things." She was right. Sarah chose her words carefully, but sometimes the beautiful and the useful can coexist. He observed her for a long moment. "Show me." The following hours were surprisingly pleasant. Sarah reorganized the kitchen under Matthew's attentive gaze, explaining her choices, creating a system that maintained elegance but added functionality. He asked questions, suggested alternatives, and at some point they began to laugh at an impossible drawer that seemed to have been designed not to open. "You have a talent for this," he commented when they finished. "For organizing kitchens?" Sarah smiled. "That's what happens when you grow up having to do a lot with little." "No." He stared at her with those intense blue eyes. For seeing beyond the surface, the moment extended between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, as if remembering who he was, where he was, Matthew stepped away. "Thank you for the reorganization." But something had changed. In the following days, he began to appear more. Sometimes he found her cleaning the deck and stayed nearby, pretending to read reports. Other times he showed up in the kitchen during meal preparation, watching her work. "You cook differently," he commented one night. "Different how?" "With soul, as if each dish told a story." Sarah blushed. "My mother used to say that food without love is just fuel." She was wise. She was. The longing tightened her chest. She made mold that could make angels cry. "From joy. Do you know how to make it?" "Of course. It's laborious, but make it, please." That's how the nights of conversation in the kitchen began. While Sarah prepared dishes that reminded her of home, Matthew sat on the counter, a glass of wine in his hand, and gradually the stories emerged. He talked about Isabella, the perfect wife, the socialite who abandoned everything to stay with him, the love he thought was eternal, about the night of the accident, the call that changed. Everything, the months of darkness that followed. Sarah talked about her father, about broken promises, about holding her mother's hand while she wasted away, about the nights awake, wondering how she would feed her siblings the next day. "How did you endure it?" he asked one night, genuinely impressed. "I didn't have a choice. David and Emma needed me." There are always choices. Not when you love someone. When you truly love, you simply continue. Matthew was silent for a long time. I stopped. "No." Sarah stared at him. "You're here, breathing. That's already continuing." They developed an unspoken routine. Dinner at 8, conversation until late, sometimes shared silence while watching the stars. The crew began to notice the change in Matthew. He smiled more, drank less, even interacted with them, occasionally. "Be careful, girl," Carlos warned her. "Men like him, they live in a different world from ours." But Sarah wasn't falling in love. She couldn't be. It was just mutual understanding, two wounded souls recognizing each other's pain. Until the night everything changed. They were anchored in a calm bay near Key West. The full moon illuminated the waters, creating a silver path over the waves. Sarah had prepared chiles rellenos, and Matthew had opened special wine. "It's David's favorite dish," she explained. "I make it every year on his birthday." "When is it?" "Next week." The realization hit her like a punch. "I'm going to miss his birthday." The tears came before she could contain them. 3 weeks at sea, and this was the first time she really felt the weight of distance. "Hey!" Matthew came around the counter, hesitant. "We can call them tomorrow. Use the satellite." "It's not the same thing. I promised I'd always be there. Always." "You're doing this for them. They don't understand that. They're still children. They only know their sister isn't there. Again." Without thinking, Matthew pulled her into his arms. Sarah let herself be. Embraced, crying against his chest, releasing weeks of tension and longing. "You're a good sister," he murmured against her hair. "The best they could have." She lifted her face to thank him and got lost in his eyes. They were so close she could count each eyelash, each small line around his eyes, the air between them charged with electricity. "Sarah." "No." She stepped away, her heart racing. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because you still love your wife. Because I'm just the employee. Because when this trip ends, you go back to your world and I to mine. What if I don't want to go back?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah shook her head, unable to process the implications. "Good night, Mr. Montenegro." She fled to her room, leaving him alone in the kitchen. But sleep didn't come. She stayed awake, reliving every moment, every touch, every unspoken word. The next day, Matthew kept his distance, but at night, he left an envelope under her door. Inside, a plane ticket. "So you can be with David on his birthday. The captain can manage for 2 days, please." Sarah held the paper with trembling hands. It was more than a ticket. It was recognition of who she was beyond that yacht, beyond that uniform. The trip back to Miami Beach was a mix of joy and apprehension. Sarah hugged David and Emma as if she hadn't seen them in years, not just 3 weeks. The small rented house seemed even smaller after the yacht's space, but it was full of something, the hope, with all. Its luxury didn't have, it was a home. "You're different," Emma observed while helping Sarah prepare David's birthday cake. "Different how, mi amor?" "I don't know. More sad and happy at the same time." A 12-year-old's perception surprised her. It was exactly how she felt, divided between 2 worlds, 2 hearts, 2 versions of herself. David's birthday was simple, but perfect. Sarah prepared all his favorite dishes, invited his friends, even managed to buy the used video game he'd wanted. Him for months, but her mind constantly wandered to the sea, to blue eyes that carried storms, to nightly conversations that had become her refuge. "Who is he?" David asked when they were alone, after the guests had left. "Who?" "The guy who's making you sigh every 5 minutes." "It's nothing like that." "Sarah." He held her hand, and for a moment she saw the man he was becoming. "You deserve to be happy too." The tears threatened to fall again. When had her little brother grown so much? Complicated. Love always is. Who said anything about love? David just smiled, that wise smile that didn't match his 15 years. "Thank you for being here. I know it was hard to arrange." "I'll always be here for you both. Always." But while hugging her brother, Sarah wondered if she could continue keeping that promise. The world had expanded beyond the walls of her small life, and there was no way to pretend she didn't long for more. Dear viewers, Have you ever felt divided between duty and desire, between caring for others and caring for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to leave that like that helps our story reach more hearts. Oh, and tell me, from which city are you watching? The return to the Hope was strange. Matthew received her with distant politeness, as if the intimate moments they had shared were just her imagination. But Sarah noticed the small signs, the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided her gaze, the nights he spent on deck instead of having dinner with her. Carlos informed her they would change route. Instead of continuing through the Caribbean, they would sail further south, explore lesser-known islands. Hurricane season was approaching, but Matthew seemed determined to get as far as possible from civilization. It was during a seemingly calm afternoon that Sarah found him in the office, surrounded by photo albums. She had entered to clean, but stopped seeing him so vulnerable. Today would be our anniversary, he said without looking at her. 7 years. Sarah approached cautiously. The photos showed a younger Matthew, radiant, next to a woman who seemed to have stepped out of a magazine. Isabella was the opposite of her in everything, blonde, tall, sophisticated, with that air of someone born with a silver spoon. She was beautiful. She was perfect. Matthew touched a photo where they were dancing. We knew each other's steps before the music even started. How did you meet? Charity event. I was starting in the nautical business. She was the biggest investor's daughter in town. It shouldn't have worked, but it worked. For 6 perfect years. He abruptly closed the album. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. I want to hear it. He stared at her, surprised. Why? Because it's part of who you are. Because shared pain weighs less. Because... She hesitated. Because I care. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then, like a dam. Breaking, Matthew began to talk. About the dream wedding, about plans to have children, about the silly fight on the morning of the accident because he had forgotten an important dinner. My last words to her were irritation. I said she cared more about appearances than our marriage. His voice broke. 3 hours later, she was dead. Matthew, she was going to dinner alone. To keep up appearances, not to hurt me in business. If I had gone with her, no. Sarah held his face between her. Anne's forcing him to look at her. Don't do this. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. How do you not think about it? About your father, your mother? I think about it every day. I wonder if I could have done something different, if I could have prevented my mother from getting sick, if I could have made my father stay. She released his face but kept her gaze steady. But then I remember that life doesn't give us the power to change the past, only to choose what to do with the present. And what did you choose? To keep loving, even when it hurts, even when it seems impossible. Matthew leaned forward, and for a moment Sarah thought he would kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. I'm afraid, he whispered. Of what? Of forgetting her, of falling in love again, of betraying what we had. Loving again isn't betraying. It's honoring what you had by showing you learned to love well. He stepped away, but there was something different in his eyes, a small crack in the wall he had built around his heart. The following days brought a new dynamic. Matthew began to participate more actively in yacht life. He helped Sarah in the kitchen, shared stories with the crew, even laughed when Carlos told a terrible joke about a fish and a lawyer. "You're working miracles," the captain commented to Sarah one night. "It's not me." "Of course it is. He's coming back to life." But with closeness came moments of tension. The accidental touches that lasted too long, the looks that said more than words, the electricity in the air when they were alone. It was during a particularly spectacular sunset that the tension reached its peak. They were anchored near a deserted island, the sky painted in impossible shades of pink and orange. Sarah had prepared fresh ceviche, and they dined on deck in comfortable silence. "Tell me about your dreams," Matthew suddenly asked. "My dreams. Before all this, before the responsibilities, what did Sarah Johnson want to be?" She smiled sadly. "It seems like a lifetime ago." "Please." "I wanted to be a chef, have my own restaurant, small but cozy, a place where people came not just for the food, but for the feeling of being home." "Why didn't you pursue it?" "You know why. David and Emma. I don't regret it," she hurried to say. "They are my life. But sometimes I wonder who I would be if things were different." Matthew stood up and extended his hand. "Dance with me." "What?" "There's no music. We don't need any." Against her better judgment, Sarah accepted his hand. Matthew pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other intertwined with hers. They began to move slowly, the sound of waves as melody. "Isabella loved to dance," he murmured. Sarah tried to pull away, but he kept her close. "No, it's not about her now. It's about you, about us." "Matthew, I know it's wrong. I know you work for me, that I come from a different world, that I'm still—" He paused, searching for words. "Broken. But when I'm with you, Sarah, I remember what it's like to feel hope." "Don't do this," she pleaded, even as she melted in his arms. "Don't give me hopes you can't fulfill." "What if I can? You don't know my world, the reality of my life. You live in this floating paradise. I have bills to pay, siblings to raise, a life that doesn't fit in your plans." "Then change the plans." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He stopped dancing, holding her by the shoulders. "Why can't it be simple?" "Because I'm not Isabella." The words exploded from her. "I'm not sophisticated. I don't come from a rich family. I don't know which fork to use at an elegant dinner. I'm just Sarah, the employee who reorganized your kitchen." "Exactly." His eyes shone with intensity. "You're Sarah, who cooks with soul, who sees beyond surfaces, who made me want to wake up again. You're not Isabella, and that's why—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The kiss came like a long-announced storm, inevitable, overwhelming, transformative. Sarah lost herself in the sensation, in the taste of wine and possibilities, in the warmth of his arms around her. When they separated, both were breathing with difficulty. "This changes everything," she whispered. "I know." "What do we do now?" Matthew caressed her face with a tenderness that made her want to cry. "I don't know, but for the first time in 3 years, I want to find out." The moment was interrupted by Carlos, running to them, his face pale with worry. "Sir, we have a problem. Category 3 storm forming to the west. It's coming our way, and fast." The happiness bubble burst. Matthew immediately entered captain mode, giving orders, checking routes. Sarah was forgotten in the urgency of the moment, but the taste of him was still on her lips, the promise still echoed in her heart. As the Hope prepared to face the storm, she couldn't help thinking that the real tempest was just beginning, the one happening. Inside them, between them, around them, the wind began to howl, and the first raindrops hit the deck. Sarah retreated to her room, her heart divided between fear and hope. Outside, the sea showed its fury. Inside her, love showed its own. The storm hit the Hope with brutal force. What began as strong winds and rain quickly escalated to a natural fury that made the 50-meter yacht seem like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Sarah clung to the bed in her small room, her stomach churning with the violent movement, praying for her siblings, for the crew, for Matthew. "Everyone to life jackets!" Carlos's voice echoed through the internal sound system. "This is not a drill!" With trembling hands, Sarah put on the orange vest and staggered through the corridors. Water was already invading the lower deck, and the boat tilted dangerously with each wave. She found part of the crew gathered in the main room, faces pale with fear. "Where is Mr. Montenegro?" she shouted over the storm's roar. "On the bridge with the captain." Sarah didn't think. Ignoring the others' protests, she fought against wind and rain until reaching the bridge. Matthew was next to Carlos, both struggling to maintain control of the yacht. "What are you doing here?" Matthew shouted upon seeing her. "Go back down! I won't leave you!" "Sarah, please!" A monstrous wave hit the Hope sideways. The impact was devastating. Electrical systems exploded in sparks. The hull groaned under pressure, and then came the sound. Every sailor fears the tearing of metal. "We're taking on water!" Carlos shouted. "The hull has been compromised. How much time do we have?" "Minutes at most." Matthew grabbed the radio, sending the SOS, but static was the only response. They were alone, in the middle of liquid hell. "Lifeboats! Now!" The evacuation was chaotic. The crew fought to launch the boats while the Hope tilted more and more. Sarah helped where she could, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. "You first!" Matthew pushed her toward one of the boats. "Not without you! Don't be stubborn! Don't be an idiot!" They didn't have time to argue more. The Hope gave one last agonized groan and began to sink rapidly. In the confusion, Sarah was separated from the others, a wave dragging her away from the lifeboat. The icy water was a shock. She fought to stay on the surface. "Sarah!" Matthew's voice cut through the chaos. He was swimming toward her, fighting against the monumental waves. When he reached her, she clung to him as if her life depended on it, and it did. "There has to be something there!" He pointed to yacht debris floating. Part of the deck had broken off, forming an improvised raft. Together they fought against the furious sea. Each wave threatened to separate them, but Matthew kept one arm firmly around her while swimming. When they finally reached the debris, both were exhausted. "Get up!" He pushed her onto the floating wood. "Matthew, your arm!" Only then did she notice. The deep cut, blood mixing with salt water. "I'm fine," but his pale face said otherwise. The storm continued for hours that seemed like days. They clung to the debris and to each other while the sea tried to claim them. Sarah tore part of her shirt to make an improvised tourniquet on Matthew's arm, her hands trembling not just from cold. "Talk to me," she begged when his eyes started to close. "Stay awake." "Tired." "No, Matthew, look at me." She held his face. "Tell me about the first boat." "You had," a weak smile. It was an inflatable boat. I was 8. My father said every Montenegro needs to know how to sail. Continue. And he continued. Childhood stories, dreams, fears. Sarah responded with her own stories, anything to keep them conscious, to keep hope alive while the storm carried them to the unknown. When the sun finally rose, it revealed a calm sea and an empty horizon. There was no sign of the hope or the lifeboats, just infinite water in all directions. Matthew, Sarah touched his face. He was burning with fever. I'm here, he murmured, but his eyes were glazed. The cut on his arm had become infected. Without medical supplies, without drinking water, the situation was desperate. Sarah did what she could, using seawater to clean the wound, praying for a miracle. It was at noon that she saw it, a green spot on the horizon. Land! She gently shook Matthew. There's an island. We need to swim. I can't. Go without me. Don't even think about it. With strength she didn't know she possessed, Sarah tied Matthew to the debris using the life jacket cords. We go together or we don't go. The swim was agonizing. Sarah pulled the improvised raft, each stroke a battle. Matthew went in and out of consciousness, murmuring disconnected things. Sometimes he called for Isabella, sometimes for her. When she finally felt sand under her feet, Sarah almost cried with relief. With superhuman effort, she dragged Matthew to the beach, away from the waves' reach. The island was small but not deserted. There were coconut trees, dense vegetation, signs of fresh water, a paradise that could become a prison. I need to find water, she told unconscious Matthew. I'll be right back. The exploration revealed a small spring in the island's interior. Sarah improvised a container with large leaves and came running back. Matthew was awake, trying to sit up. Hey, easy. She helped him drink. How do you feel? Like I was run over by my own yacht. He tried to smile, but grimaced in pain. Where are we? I don't know. An island. We're alive, that's what matters. The others? I don't know. Worry for the crew weighed on her heart. But they made it to the boats. They should be fine. Matthew tried to stand and almost fainted. The fever was getting worse. I need to take care of that cut. Sarah examined the wound. I'll look for medicinal plants. My grandmother taught me some things. Sarah. He held her hand. If I don't. No, not having this conversation. You're going to be fine. She spent the following hours looking for plants she recognized, silently thanking the afternoons, listening to home remedy stories. She found aloe vera, which would help with infection, and some herbs that could lower fever. While caring for him, Matthew was delirious. He talked to people who weren't there, relived moments from the past. It was painful to witness, but Sarah remained by his side, wiping sweat from his forehead, forcing him to drink water, applying improvised remedies. Don't leave me, he murmured in a moment of lucidity. Never, she promised. The first night was the worst. Matthew burned with fever, his body fighting infection. Sarah didn't sleep, watching every breath, every movement. When he shivered from cold despite the heat, she wrapped him in her arms. When heat consumed him, she bathed him with cool water. Why are you doing this? He asked during a moment of clarity. Because it's what you do when you love someone, she answered without thinking, then froze, realizing what she had said. Matthew stared at her with eyes that, despite the fever, were completely focused. Do you love me? Sarah looked away. You're delirious. Maybe. But I need to know, do you love me, Sarah? She met his eyes again, seeing in them not the millionaire, not the broken widower, but simply Matthew, the man who danced with her without music, who reorganized a kitchen by her side, who saved her during the storm. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me, but yes." He smiled, that smile that transformed his face. "I love you too." "Matthew, I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. But when you're facing death, things become very clear." He caressed her face. "I love you, Sarah Johnson. Not like I loved Isabella. Different. New. Scary and wonderful." Tears ran freely down her face. "You're going to survive to prove it. I promise." In the following days, Matthew slowly improved. The fever subsided. To heal, the cut Together began. They created a survival routine. Sarah proved surprisingly skilled. She built a shelter with palm leaves, discovered which fruits were edible, even managed to fish using an improvised spear. "Where did you learn all this?" Matthew asked, impressed. "TV documentaries." She laughed. "David is obsessed with survival shows. Never thought it would be useful." "You're incredible." "I'm a survivor," she corrected. "I always have been." The nights were the hardest. Lying under the stars, the reality of their situation weighed on them. How long until they were found? What if they weren't? And the others? Had they survived? "Tell me about the restaurant," Matthew asked one night. "What you dreamed." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "It would be small, maybe 20 tables, simple but cozy decoration, warm colors, soft music. It would have a menu that changed with seasons, always fresh, local ingredients." "Continue." "There would be a special table in the corner, near the window, for couples on first dates or old friends reconnecting. It would be known as the lucky table. They say whoever sits there finds what they're looking for." "What else?" "On Fridays, there would be live music. Nothing extravagant, maybe a guitarist. On Sundays, special breakfast for families. Children would eat for free." "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to be a worried mother wondering if she can feed her children. No child should know that feeling." Matthew was silent for a long moment. "When we get out of here, I'm going to make it happen." "Matthew, don't argue. Let me dream too." They kissed under the stars. A kiss different from the first, less urgent, more promise. A kiss from those who had all the time in the world, even if the world was a lost island. On the 5th day, Matthew was strong enough to explore. They discovered the island was larger than they thought, with a rocky elevation in the center that could serve as an observation point. "Let's climb," he suggested. "Maybe we can see something." The climb was difficult but rewarding. From the top, they could see the ocean stretching in all directions, but also, "There," Sarah pointed, "there's another island." It was distant, but there was definitely another landmass. And where there was one island, there could be more. There could be civilization. "We need to make a signal," Matthew said. "Smoke, something that can be seen from far away." They worked together to create a signal fire at the highest point. Green leaves to create dense smoke, shifts to keep the fire burning. It was during Sarah's shift on the 7th day that she saw it. "Matthew!" she screamed. "A boat! There's a boat!" He ran to her, and together they frantically fed the fire. The smoke rose, dense and dark. The boat, still a dot on the horizon, seemed to change direction. "It's coming! It's coming this way!" They embraced, laughing and crying at the same time. Salvation, rescue, return to civilization. But as They watched the boat approach. A realization hit them. Out there, they were from different worlds. Out there were obstacles, differences, separate lives waiting for them. "What happens now?" Sarah asked quietly. Matthew pulled her closer. "Now, we choose. Continue as we were, or we rewrite our story. Together." The boat was getting closer and closer. Soon, they would have to face reality. But for now, in that moment, they were just two survivors who had found more than they expected on a lost island. They had found each other. And you, dear viewers, have you ever been through an extreme situation that completely changed your perspective on life and love? Share your stories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the exciting conclusion of this journey. Tell me also, from which city are you watching this story of overcoming and love? The rescue was a whirlwind of activity. The boat belonged to local fishermen who had spotted the smoke. They barely spoke English, but joy was universal. Matthew and Sarah were received with water, food, and blankets. Their saviors marveled by the survival story. "The others?" was Matthew's first question when he managed to communicate. Through gestures and broken Spanish, they understood that yes, other survivors had been rescued days before. The Hope's crew was alive. The relief was so intense that Sarah cried. The trip to the nearest port took hours. Matthew and Sarah remained together, hands intertwined, as if letting go meant losing what they had found. But as civilization approached, so did reality. "There will be questions," Matthew said quietly. "Press, investigations about the shipwreck. I know. My family will go crazy. They probably already gave me up for dead." "Matthew." Sarah recognized the tone. He was preparing for the world out there, building walls again. "No." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not backing down. I need to prepare you. It's going to be intense." He was right. The moment they stepped onto the port of Miami, chaos began. Apparently the Hope's shipwreck had been international news. Millionaire disappeared at sea, crew rescued without the boss. Their survival story was the kind of drama the media loved. "Mr. Montenegro, how did you survive? Who is the woman with you? Is it true you were trapped on a deserted island?" Matthew protected Sarah with his body while they ran to the waiting car. But there was no protection against camera. Flashes or invasive questions. At the hospital they were separated for examinations. Sarah found herself alone for the first time in a week, and Matthew's absence was physical. A kind nurse lent her a phone. "Sarah?" David's voice was hoarse with worry. "Is it you?" "It's me, mi amor. I'm okay." Her brother's crying broke her. Emma took the phone, also crying, and for minutes Sarah could only repeat that she was okay, that she would be home soon. "We thought you had died," Emma sobbed. TV said, "The boat sank and I'm here, I'm alive, I'll be there soon." But when? Matthew had mentioned investigations, and she realized that as an employee, she would probably have to testify. And there was the unmentioned question of what they would be now. On the island, it was simple. "Here." "Miss Johnson?" A man in a suit entered the room. "I'm Ricardo Vega, Mr. Montenegro's lawyer. He asked me to take care of you." "Where is he?" "Being examined. His family arrived from New York. They're anxious to see him." Something in his tone alerted her. "But he insisted on speaking with you first, as soon as the doctors clear him." The following hours were a blur of examinations, questions, forms. Sarah was treated with deference that made her uncomfortable. Clearly, Matthew's instructions were for her to receive the best possible treatment. It was almost midnight when they finally reunited. Matthew was in a private room, his arm properly bandaged, wearing clean clothes that made him look like the millionaire he was, but his eyes lit up seeing her. Sarah. He extended his good hand and she ran to him. Your family? Sleeping at the hotel. It was intense. He caressed her hair. My mother almost had a heart attack when she learned I was alive. I'm sorry. Don't be. You saved me in every possible way. They remained in silence, just holding each other. Then Matthew sighed. I need to tell you something about Isabella. Sarah pulled away to face him. What? The accident? Investigation. They discovered something after I left on the trip. My lawyer told me today. He ran his hand over his face. She was having an affair. Oh, Matthew, for months, with my partner, ex-partner now. His voice was strangely calm. That night, she wasn't going to the business dinner. She was going to meet him. They were planning to run away together. Sarah didn't know what to say. How do you console someone who discovers their pain was based on a lie? The worst, Matthew continued, is that part of me already knew. The signs were there, the excuses, the distances, the fights over nothing. I just didn't want to see. That doesn't diminish what you felt. Grief is real, even if perfection wasn't. He studied her with those intense blue eyes. How do you do that? What? Say exactly what I need to hear. Because I see you. The real Matthew, not the image you project. And what do you see? A good man who loved deeply, who was betrayed but didn't become bitter, who saved my life as much as I saved his. Matthew pulled her to the bed, embracing her. Stay with me. Matthew, just tonight, please. Tomorrow we face the world. Tonight, just be mine. She stayed. They slept embraced in the hospital bed, finding peace in each other. Morning brought exactly what Matthew had predicted. Chaos. His family arrived early, and Sarah had her first glimpse of his world. His mother, Doña Eleanor, was an imposing woman, clearly accustomed to control. His brother Ricardo was a younger version of Matthew, but without the warmth. So you're the heroine, Doña Elena said, studying Sarah as if she were a puzzle to solve. We owe you a lot. You owe nothing. Matthew saved me too. The sound was loaded with unspoken meaning. The conversation was polite but tense. Sarah noticed the evaluative looks, the subtle questions about her origin, her family. Matthew tried to intervene several times, but his mother was a force of nature. We need to return to the capital, Doña Elena announced. There are businesses to resolve, and you need proper care. I'll go when I'm ready, Matthew responded firmly. Don't be ridiculous. You almost died. And I survived, thanks to Sarah. The look mother and son exchanged was loaded with decades of family dynamics. Ricardo cleared his throat. Perhaps Miss Johnson wants to return to her family, he suggested. I'm sure they're worried. Yes, Sarah agreed quickly. I need to see my siblings. I'll go with you, Matthew said. No! The answer came from three voices, Sarah, Elena, and Ricardo. You need to recover, Sarah said gently, and I need to think. Matthew stared at her, and she saw fear in his eyes, fear that outside the island bubble she would realize how impossible they were. She kissed his forehead softly. I'm not running away, I just need to process everything. Promise? I promise. The farewell was difficult. Doña Elena offered a car to take her, which Sarah reluctantly accepted. During the trip to Miami Beach, she contemplated everything that had happened. In 2 weeks, her life had turned upside down. The reunion with David and Emma was emotionally intense. They clung to her as if they feared she would disappear again. Aunt Rose cried. Neighbors came to welcome her, the small house filled with love and relief. But at night, when everyone slept, Sarah went out to the small patio. The moon was full, like that night on the yacht when Matthew kissed her for the first time. Her phone, a new one, courtesy of Matthew's lawyer, vibrated. "I can't sleep without you." His message made her heart race. "Neither can I. My family is complicated. I noticed. Don't let them scare you." "Matthew, what are we now?" The 3 dots indicating he was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "We're 2 people who survived the impossible and found love. The rest we figure out together. Your world and mine are the same world. We were just looking from different angles." Sarah smiled despite the tears. "You should be a poet. You inspire me." "Matthew, yes? I love you too. I know. That's why I'm going to fight for us." In the following days, life tried to return to normal. But what was normal after everything? Sarah tried to look for work, but the fame of castaway who saved the millionaire preceded her. Reporters appeared at unexpected moments. Interview offers arrived daily. Matthew called every night. He talked about recovery, about businesses he needed to resolve, about the shipwreck investigation, mechanical failure aggravated by the storm. But there was unmentioned tension. When would they see each other again? It was Emma who precipitated things. "You're sad," she said one night, lying next to Sarah. "I'm not. You are. Since you came back. It's because of him, isn't it? The rich man. It's complicated, mi amor. Love always is. But you taught me it's worth fighting for what we love." Out of the mouths of babes. The next day, Sarah made a decision. She called Matthew. "I need to see you. We need to talk about everything in person." Thank God. The relief in his voice was palpable. "I'll send the plane." "No, I'll take the bus. I need to do this my way." "Sarah, trust me." The trip to New York was long, giving her time to think. When she arrived, Matthew was waiting at the bus station, alone, dressed simply. He looked nervous. "You came." "I promised I wouldn't run away." He took her not to his mansion, but to a small cafe in the historic center. They sat at a corner table like normal people. "I have a proposal," he began. "But first, I need you to know, no matter your answer, I love you. That doesn't change." "Matthew, let me finish. I know our worlds seem different. I know my family can be intimidating. I know you have responsibilities, fears, a life of your own." He took a deep breath. "But I also know I want to spend my life proving we can build something together, something ours. What are you proposing?" He took an envelope from his pocket. "Your restaurant, what you described on the island. I want to invest in it, be your partner. But more than that." He took out another envelope. "Scholarships for David and Emma, the best schools, apartment near school for the 3 of you, not as charity, as investment in our future." "Matthew, I can't accept. I'm not finished." He held her hands. "I'm also changing. I sold my part in the company. I'm going to start something new, smaller, more meaningful, and I want it to be in Miami Beach, close to you if you'll let me." Sarah stared at him, processing everything. "You sold your company?" "Discovering about Isabella and Miguel. Made me realize I was living a life that wasn't mine. You showed me that. I didn't ask. I know. That's why I want to do it. Sarah, on the island, you asked me what would happen when we returned. This is my answer. I choose you. I choose us. Every day, for the rest of my life, if you'll have me. The tears flowed freely now. And your family? They'll have to accept it, or not. But I won't live for others anymore. Matthew, you don't need to answer now. Think about it. But know I'm willing to fight. Wait, do whatever it takes. Sarah looked at the man in front of her. Not the millionaire, not the broken widower, but Matthew, her Matthew, the man who danced with her without music, who survived the impossible by her side, who loved her. Not despite who she was, but because of it. Yes, she said simply. Yes? To everything. The restaurant, the scholarships, you in Miami Beach. Yes. His smile lit up the entire cafe. He kissed her right there, not caring about curious looks. But, Sarah added when they separated, we do this together, equal partners. I work in the restaurant, don't just own it. And you get to know my family properly. As Matthew, not as Mr. Montenegro. Anything. And your mother? Leave my mother to me. She'll love you. Eventually. Sarah laughed. You're very optimistic. You taught me to have hope again. How could it be different? 6 months later, the restaurant Hope opened its doors in Miami Beach. Sarah chose the name not for the sunken yacht, but for what it represented. The beginning of a new life, a new hope. The decoration was exactly as she had dreamed, warm, welcoming, with touches of blue that reminded of the sea. The corner table, near the window, was already known as the Miracle Table. On the wall, discreetly, a photo of the original Hope, a silent tribute to the destiny that united them. Nervous? Matthew asked, adjusting her apron. He had insisted on working in the restaurant, starting from scratch, learning every aspect of the business. Terrified, she admitted. Hey, he lifted her chin. You survived a shipwreck, tamed a stubborn millionaire, and even won over my mother. This here is easy. Sarah laughed. The conquest of Doña Elena had been gradual, but real. The formidable woman had resisted for months, but when she saw the change in her son, the genuine happiness, the renewed purpose, she began to give in. The turning point was when Emma, with her child's honesty, asked why she didn't want Matthew to be happy. It's not that, Doña Elena had protested. Then what's the problem? Sarah makes him smile. Isn't that what mothers want? Wisdom from a 12-year-old girl breaking down class barriers. Team meeting. Carlos, the ex-captain of the Kirke. Open now restaurant manager, called everyone. He had survived the shipwreck and, when Matthew offered the job, accepted with joy. Today we make history. The team was an eclectic mix. Some experienced professionals, some local youth that Sarah trained personally. David helped in the afternoons after school, proud to see his sister realizing her dream. The first hours were controlled chaos. Orders got mixed up, a dish burned, a new waitress dropped a tray. But Sarah was in her element, coordinating the kitchen with a conductor's precision. Order for table 7, she shouted, finishing the dish with a final touch of cilantro. It's the miracle table, Matthew informed, peeking through the kitchen window. First date, he's clearly nervous. Then let's make sure it's perfect. And it was, like the whole night. When the last customer left, the team exploded in applause and hugs. Hope was officially open. We did it, Sarah whispered, leaning against Matthew as they observed the Empty but possibility-filled restaurant. You did it, he corrected. I just went along for the ride. Our ride, she insisted. Outside, the sea murmured its eternal song, the same sea that had united them, tested them, and finally delivered them to each other. 3 years passed, like a waking dream. Hope became one of the most sought-after restaurants in the region, known not only for exceptional food, but for the atmosphere Sarah had dreamed of, a place where people came to celebrate, reconnect, find a piece of home. David, now 18, had been accepted to a prestigious engineering university. Emma, at 15, showed exceptional talent for music and studied at the conservatory. Both flourished with the opportunities Sarah and Matthew had provided. "You're thoughtful," Matthew observed one morning, finding Sarah on the terrace of their house, a modest but beautiful house with a sea view. "Just reflecting," she replied, caressing her still flat belly. "About how life surprises us." "What do you mean?" She turned to face him, her soft blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "Remember when you asked me about my dreams on that island?" "Every word. I said I wanted a restaurant. That was true. But there was another dream I didn't mention, one I thought I'd never have." Matthew observed her, waiting. "A family, my own family." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Our baby." His face went through a series of emotions: shock, joy, wonder, fear. "You're pregnant. 8 weeks. Sarah!" He lifted her, spinning her in the air, both laughing and crying. "A baby! Our baby! Are you happy? Happy?" He put her down, holding her face. There are no words. After Isabella, I thought I'd never... And now I have everything I never knew I wanted." They kissed with the passion of new lovers and the comfort of souls who knew each other deeply. When they separated, Matthew was wearing that smile that still made Sarah's heart race. "Doña, Elena is going to go crazy," he said, with joy or horror. "Definitely joy. She's been dropping not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren." Sarah laughed. The relationship with her mother-in-law had evolved into genuine affection. Elena frequently visited, helped at the restaurant, and had become a substitute grandmother for David and Emma. "When do we tell them?" Sarah asked. "Today, family dinner, everyone together." And that's what they did. That night, Hope closed early for a private celebration. The Montenegro family, now fully including the Johnson siblings, gathered at the miracle table. "We have an announcement," Matthew began, holding Sarah's hand. "Finally," Emma exclaimed. "You're getting married?" Sarah and Matthew looked at each other. They had never formalized their union, perfectly happy with the commitment they had built. "Better," Sarah said. "You're going to be aunts and uncles." The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before chaos exploded. Emma screamed with joy. David was momentarily speechless before hugging his sister. Doña Elena cried openly, murmuring thanks in Spanish. Ricardo, who had arrived with his wife, toasted enthusiastically. "A baby," Elena repeated, touching Sarah's face with maternal tenderness. "My grandchild, or granddaughter." "We hope they have your eyes," Matthew said, looking at Sarah, "blue like the sea that united us." "And your stubbornness," Sarah teased. "That saved them when everything seemed lost." Carlos, moved, proposed a toast. "To the castaways who found more than dry land. They found a home in each other." While everyone toasted, Sarah felt deep peace. There, surrounded by love, in the restaurant of her dreams, carrying the child of the man she loved, She understood that the best journeys were those we didn't plan. The baby was born on a stormy morning, as if the sea wanted to mark her arrival. Isabella Hope Montenegro Johnson came into the world screaming, with her mother's blue eyes and her father's determination. "She's perfect," Matthew whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "Isabella?" Sarah asked softly. They had discussed names but never mentioned this one. "If you agree. Not for her," he clarified, referring to his ex-wife, "but because it means consecrated to God, and this little one is our miracle." "Isabella Hope," Sarah agreed, "for new beginnings." Little Isabella grew surrounded by love. David and Emma were devoted aunt and uncle, Doña Eleanor a doting grandmother. The restaurant had a special high chair where she stayed while her parents worked, charming customers with her babbling. "She's going to be a chef," Sarah declared, seeing her 2-year-old daughter playing with wooden spoons. "Or a captain," Matthew suggested. "Have you seen how she looks at the sea?" "Or both," David intervened. "Chef of a floating restaurant." "No!" Sarah and Matthew answered in unison, then laughed at their own vehemence. Hope had expanded. Now there was a second. Location in Key West, managed by David after he graduated. Emma, graduated in music, organized the cultural nights that had become the restaurant's trademark. It was on one of those nights, with Isabella sleeping in her father's arms while Emma played guitar, that Sarah had her epiphany. "We need to tell our story," she said suddenly. "What?" Matthew looked at her, confused. "Our story, the shipwreck, the island, how we found each other. People always ask, but we never tell everything." "It's very personal," he hesitated. "Exactly why we should tell it. How many people out there need to hear that it's possible, that from the worst moment the best can be born?" Emma stopped playing. "You could write a book, Sarah." "Or," David suggested, "make a documentary. I have a filmmaker friend who would love the project." "What do you think?" Sarah asked Matthew. He looked at his sleeping daughter, then at the woman who had changed his life. "I think our story deserves to be told, but with one condition." "What?" "That it's about hope, about how two broken people can become whole together." And so another chapter began. The documentary filming brought back memories, some painful, others precious. Revisiting the island where they were stranded was especially emotional. "Here," Sarah pointed to the spring. "It was here I saved your life. And here," Matthew took her to the beach, "was where you saved my soul." The documentary, when released, touched thousands of hearts. Letters arrived from around the world, people sharing their own stories of overcoming and love. The Hope restaurant became a pilgrimage destination for those seeking their own miracle. "It's strange," Sarah commented one night, reading some of the letters. "We've become symbols of something bigger." "It's not strange," Matthew disagreed. "It's responsibility, showing it's worth believing." Isabella, now 4, climbed onto her mother's lap. "Mommy, why do people cry when they hear your story?" Sarah caressed her daughter's hair. "Because sometimes, mi amor, tears are like rain. They clean the path for the sun to appear. Like when you and Daddy got lost at sea?" "Exactly. We got lost, but we found each other." The 10th anniversary of the shipwreck was marked with a special celebration. All survivors of the original Hope gathered at the restaurant. Carlos made an emotional speech about second chances. The crew shared their own journeys since that fateful night. "You know, one of the Sailors said, "At first I was angry, losing my job, almost dying. But now I see it was a gift. It made me value every day." "Life is like that," Matthew replied, Isabella in his lap, his arm around Sarah. "Sometimes it needs to break us to rebuild us stronger." Sarah looked around, her restaurant full, her family united, a life that exceeded her wildest dreams. David had married and was expecting his first child. Emma had recorded her first album. Doña Eleanor had become not just a mother-in-law, but a true mother. And Matthew was her safe harbor in all storms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "About how life is surprising. If someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be here, you wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have dared dream so high. And now?" Sarah smiled, that smile that began shy on a luxury yacht and now illuminated 3 lives. "Now I know the best dreams are those life writes for us." The night continued with music, food, and memories. Emma played a song she composed about her sister's journey. David made a toast to the castaways who found treasure. Isabella fell asleep in her parents' arms, secure in the love the storm had forged. When the last guest left, Sarah and Matthew were alone in the restaurant like that first opening night. "Regrets?" he asked, a ritual they had developed. "None," she replied, as always. "You?" "Just one." "What?" Sarah was alarmed. "Not shipwrecking sooner." She laughed, lightly hitting his shoulder. "Terrible, but true. Every day with you is worth 10 ordinary lives." They kissed in the empty restaurant, their love mature, but no less intense. Outside, the sea sang its eternal song, witness to a story that began with loss and transformed into infinite gain. "Shall we go home?" Matthew suggested. "We're already home," Sarah replied. "Wherever we are together, that's home." They walked hand in hand along the beach, Isabella secure between them, leaving footprints in the sand that the tide would take away. But it didn't matter. They had learned that some marks, the truly important ones, not all the storms in the world could erase. On the horizon, the full moon illuminated the water's path, the same silver path that once guided them to each other. And somewhere in the depths, the remains of the original hope rested, having fulfilled its final purpose, uniting 2 souls who needed to shipwreck to finally find their way. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the sea. "For what?" Matthew asked. "For giving me you, for giving me everything." "It wasn't the sea," he said, kissing her temple. "It was you. Your courage, your strength, your heart. The sea was just the messenger." Isabella moved in their arms, murmuring something about boats and dreams. Her parents smiled, a new generation to write new stories, but always remembering that the greatest treasures aren't found. They're built day after day, with love, hope, and the courage to believe in new beginnings. As they walked home under the stars, Sarah said a silent prayer of gratitude. For David and Emma, who taught her about unconditional love. For Matthew, who taught her about second chances. For Isabella, who was living proof that miracles happen. And yes, even for the shipwreck that changed everything, because sometimes you need to lose your way to find your destiny. And theirs, written in the stars and sealed by the sea, was proof that every storm passes, but true love remains, deep, vast, and eternal like the ocean itself. Dear viewers, we've reached the end of this exciting journey. I hope Sarah and Matthew's story has touched your hearts as it touched mine. True love always finds a way, even in the most turbulent waters. Leave in the comments what you thought and if you also believe in new beginnings. Tell us from which city you watched this beautiful story of overcoming. Were you moved? Share with someone who needs to believe in love again. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss our next stories. Remember, every story is about someone who thought they didn't deserve to be seen, until someone truly saw them. Until next time, with another story to warm your hearts.